Hey guys, it's Drew. Thank you for checking out the Sober Fix podcast, where we talk about addiction and living life sober, one day at a time. If you like what you hear, go ahead and follow us. And if you get some time, check out our Instagram page at the Sober Fix podcast, and also our YouTube and TikTok at the Sober Fix. Hope you enjoy the episode. Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you so much for checking out another episode of the Sober Fix podcast. I'm super excited today. I've got Daniel Ritchie on today, and a fun fact. I saw Daniel on 60 Days In, and I was watching the show with my girlfriend, and he basically went in there to try and help other people and be an advocate for recovery and be someone that others in there could talk to. It was super interesting. I was glued to the TV. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I eventually reached out to Daniel in hopes that I could get him on here and hear his recovery story. And he does a lot of stuff on YouTube and is just a big advocate for recovery in general and people being able to climb out of addiction and start to live better lives. So I've got Daniel on today. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on. I'm going to give it to you to basically tell us your story, man. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been really cool. Just the whole experience of the show. Even the bad parts have been really cool, but one of the best parts of it have been, I get the opportunity to connect with individuals that are like-minded in the community, or people that are, also trying to quote unquote recover out loud, or just trying to voice their stories to bring hope or to inspire change, and to be able to connect with people all over the country. I mean, all over the world is it's amazing. There's more people in recovery, or more, I should say, more people affected by addiction than even sometimes we realize, even though it's reached epidemic proportions. It's still it's wild. I mean, it makes me incredibly grateful to be on this end today, but at the same time, one of the things that was instilled in me early was we keep what we have by giving it away. And I've tried to almost take that a step further, other than just giving away what I have, but trying to give away what I wish I had had early in recovery. What I wish people had said to me, or the resources that I wish were there for me. I try to create those today and try to be that individual and that advocate. And, it's a lot tougher. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but neither was the way that I got here. So, and with that being said, I just kind of start, in the kind of along the traditions of what we do in our 12-step fellowships and support groups. But I mean, I started, I would say, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and lower middle class neighborhood. Played outside, rode bikes, played street hockey. It was really cliquey. It was it was already street versus street and things like that. But it was good fun. It was harmless for the most part. And I was a very athletic kid. I was a boxer as a kid. I played baseball and soccer. I excelled at swimming. And my first dream was to be an Olympic swimmer. That's what I wanted to be, an Olympic swimmer or an Olympic boxer. It was something about the Olympics that just was that was the echelon. That's where I wanted to be. I always wanted to reach for the top, I guess to say, it's never content, which has its good and bad sides. But with that being said, it's, I still remember being about 13 years old. I was riding the bus to school and seeing kids on the corner smoking and clearly handing things off to each other, or sharing joints and things like that. And I was just so intrigued. It was I was drawn to those individuals. And I was, as I said, I was involved in sports, but I never felt like I belonged with the jocks or those people. There was a lot of bullies that were jocks, and I never did well with bullies. I always felt like a bully was I always felt like there was something that I had to do. if this guy's going to bully a girl, that to me is a problem. I have to do something about it. Which led to suspensions and led to trouble. But I would say I always had trouble managing my emotions. But when I realized at early age when I started smoking weed and I would drink, it was like I felt as though I had more control over my emotions. And so at 13, I started smoking weed, acid, all going gung ho. Started selling drugs pretty quickly. And by the time I was 14, I had acquired my first felony, my first 4 felonies, all drug trafficking charges, and uh, dealt with that. Got put on probation. Already at that age, I kind of realized like, this is not a good road. I want to clean up. At 15, there was a confidential informant involved in the charges I had as a child at 14, and this confidential informant came at me before school with a box cutter to cut me, because I guess people in the neighborhood knew he was a snitch or confidential informant, whatever terminology we want to use, and we're like, harassing this guy, but I wasn't. I had nothing to do with it. But nonetheless, that event occurred. I ended up having some cops come in to the school, the last bell of the day, and they arrested me and charged me with a felony 2 intimidation of a witness, which none of that occurred. But the reason that is so significant, honestly, and this was actually something I realized after a few years in recovery, how significant this was. I was put into a group home where I was physically abused for 3 months. And the reason I was abused was because I wouldn't admit my guilt. Like, I wouldn't work their program that they were trying to implement on me, because all I had was my innocence. It's all I had. And I held on to it. With about 3 months later, charges got dismissed, and I was incredibly grateful. But as we've learned, a lot of us, or at least a lot of us have learned that unchecked trauma, you may be grateful for the survival of the situation, but if it's unchecked, that could turn into a resentment. It could turn into a characteristic, and that's what it did for me. And I ended up going even harder than I went before. Ended up awarded the state by 16, was given 2 years to juvie life, which is 21. They ended up letting me out 1 week after my 18th birthday. And I was like, I'm done. I need to do something different. And I thought that I had been gone long enough that I could just like restart my life. And that's kind of what I did. I started hanging out with the kids that were going to college and kind of partying in college parties. And I had my first mixed martial arts fight at 18 at the Aero Arena, which is no longer there, in Dayton, Ohio. It was a 3-fight tournament. I took a taxi because my license was already suspended at 18. So within a couple months of getting it. And I went up there. I won my first 2 fights and I lost my third. But I fell in love with the sport. And back then it was just no holds barred fight. I mean, there was like a few UFCs out, but it was still like pretty taboo. And so I started to compete in MMA. I also really enjoyed working out, so I became a personal trainer. So I was a personal trainer part-time. I was bouncing at clubs part-time, and I was training full-time. I wanted to be the best. Like my dream at that point was whatever the highest level is, I want to be. I want to be the best fighter that ever lived. That's literally what I told myself. But most of the people I trained with, they didn't think I could ever achieve that because I didn't wrestle in high school. I had this very blurry past that none of them really knew about, but they knew that there was something there. But I continued to party, and partying, the harder I trained, the harder I dedicated myself to that sport, the harder I partied. It was like they went hand in hand. And early on, there was, I believe there were signs that there was some issues coming forward. One of them would be, I was really weird. Like when we would go to buy drugs, like ecstasy and party drugs back then, people would get like, a night's amount. My night's amount was usually 2 or 3 times more than everybody else. Like, I was the guy in the corner grinding his teeth. You know what I mean? Turning into a mess, up for 3 days. People had to cut me off, like, all the time. But I would always recover quickly because I was healthy and in shape. Like, I would do drugs all day, but I didn't eat McDonald's or have a fast food, anything from fast food for almost 10 years. Like, talk about like, oh, but I think that's kind of the addict perception, right? Like, we don't see how harmful the drugs are because it becomes part of our life. But God forbid I put something, I'll be like, I'm not eating that. That'll slow me down. But it wasn't the same with the drugs for some reason. But anyway, so I started to compete and I won my first couple fights. I was trying to take big fights. I was trying to, I wanted to fight other champions, like, because I always knew, like, if I want to be the best, I got to beat the best. I gotta be at that level, like, and it would terrify me. But fear became something that I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy it in the moment, but I enjoyed the after effect. And uh, I was about 24 years old. I'd had a few fights, some of them farther in between than others. And I was finally going to get my shot to be a champion. Yes, I was top contender spot, but I had to fight a guy from Indiana who was currently doing pretty good. He was a champion for King of the Cage at 185. And we were supposed to meet at 185. I fought at 170, but if I wanted the fight for this 170 title, I had to beat this guy at 185. Weight classes didn't mean as much back then as they mean today. So, I took the fight, and I remember showing up to the weigh-ins that night and looking around for my opponent, and I see this guy standing in the corner. He's got a hood over his head, just zoned, like stare evil eye. And I look over and I'm like, who's fighting that dude? They were like, you are. I was like, that's the guy I'm like, yeah, I got this. And the whole time I'm like, he looks like a monster. Like his neck was coming out of the hoodie. You know what I mean? Just like, wow. But anyway, so made weight, go out to fight that night. The bell rings and come out, and I came out a little lazy, and he caught me. And it, like, immediately, like, blood was running into my eyes. I panicked, and I shot in on him to shoot a double. And when I picked him up, the only thought that was going through my mind was, like, I have to put this guy on the ground or he's going to destroy me. I was rocked. So I tried to dunk him on his head, and when I landed, I immediately knew something was wrong. Like, I wasn't sure if I was just, like, still rocked from the couple shots I took, or if I broke my neck. Like, I wasn't sure what happened. I stayed control the whole first round. We went back to our corners. I controlled ground and pounded. I was trying to, like, figure out what was going on. It was a very weird feeling. Like, there was no pain, but something was going on, and something was wrong. So go back to my corner. We come out the second round. I go to throw a jab, and my arm completely comes out of socket. And just like, boom, and I'm like, oh. So, again, I don't really feel it. My adrenaline's going. I know that my arm's out of socket, but, and I try to, and by then I kind of got my rhythm. I get my distance, and I threw a leg kick, and he didn't block it. So I threw another one, and I saw his facial expression change. I threw another one, and he started to back up. I kind of hit my angles, and I threw another leg kick as hard as I could, cracked on top of his leg, and he turned around, and I tried to Superman punch him in the air, and the ref actually grabbed me, and I won by a TKO with one arm. So not only is that one of my favorite, like, fight stories, but that night I went to the hospital, and I was given my first prescription of opioid pain medication. And I don't know, I had never had an opioid pain medication or what, but I will tell you what, I remember that moment like it was yesterday. Like, I remember I always dealt with depression. I always dealt with anxiety, especially social anxiety. Even being an athlete and being around women and stuff, I always had a lot of anxiety in those situations. I never felt comfortable. I never felt confident in real life. It was all kind of an act. But when I took those pills, it was no longer an act. I felt as though I was a better person. I was more focused. I felt like I was faster. I felt like I was bigger. I felt more confident. I felt smarter. Like all the things in life that would benefit me, I felt as though I got from that medicine. And I was so naive and so ignorant to pain medication back then. I had no idea it was even addictive. Like the doctor never said anything, and I had my surgery, ended up kind of putting the pain pills down for a little bit. I actually remember getting dope sick and thought I had the flu. Like, because I was so ignorant to it, nobody explained it to me. And I didn't have a bunch of friends that were doing drugs. And this is at the beginning of the opioid epidemic. They're not talking about dope sickness yet, really, like that, and I ended up coming back and I ended up fighting for the title. Fought a guy from Detroit, Michigan, Motor City Boxing named Mitch, and I ended up winning the fight. Won my title. One of the greatest moments of my life. Like, I still remember it like it was so vivid. I got him with a guillotine choke. I was at point that night. I choked him out in the first round. It was just a beautiful thing, a beautiful moment in my life. One of the best. And again, like went party hard that night. And that just kind of continued. And I continued to use and I continued to party. I was going to Vegas and getting an opportunity to go to star-studded parties and all these like cool things and meeting celebrities. And it was just like a wonderful opportunity. A wonderful life for me, I felt at the time. But I still struggled with depression and anxiety pretty serious. Uh, except for Saturday nights and Wednesday nights, because that was my pill schedule originally. We have that schedule, we have this progression. And the one thing I think that a lot of people that aren't in addiction fail to see, and sometimes people who are, is the progression of our disease. Like things that were fun at one time, they're exactly the same as we progress, but the feelings we have change. Like it became like desperation and I had to get these pills. I need more. And I found a doctor who was having like basically running a pill mill here in Cincinnati, who prescribed me like there's like 300 oxycontins. Plus like somas, just all these drugs I did not need, but I would justify it by saying that I needed these to compete. Like that was, what do you need to compete, Daniel? I need these pills, man. Uh, so I was abusing these pills, but nobody could really tell. I was still performing well. I wasn't missing the gym, but one of the first things that began to slip was my morals, I guess. Not that I had like these high end morals, but I started to do a lot of things that I was doing in secret because I knew like they weren't something that I would want people to know. And I think that that's sometimes one of the first signs that we're not doing well. It's usually something only we know because we're keeping secrets, these secrets that keep us sick. And then sometimes these secrets end up harming us because we're really harming others without them knowing. Like I'm cheating on girlfriends. I'm sleeping with women that I shouldn't. Just all kinds of things. Putting myself in situations that weren't good. Doing collections for a biker gang. Like just doing all these things. And to me, it fit in with the way I grew up. But at the same time, it was a life that I thought I had escaped. And I'm somehow slipping back into it without really paying much attention. Um, Without even noticing, I guess. And so I'm continuing to abuse these pills. As I'm starting to get my mental health is beginning to slip, and I eventually get cut off from this doctor. Around that same time, I discovered bath salts. Now I don't know if those were as popular anywhere else that people might watch this at, but they sold them at the gas station here. You get like a gram of bath salts, was basically meth in a thing, and I would get a couple of those a day. So I'm mixing my pills and then graduated to heroin. Right, we continue to, my addiction's beginning to progress. I became homeless. The first place I lived was a storage unit. Can't live in storage units; they won't let you. Find that out the hard way. But I I had this girlfriend, and I felt responsible for her addiction. and so then I'm hustling twice as hard. I'm having to do twice as much and just, blacking out. I remember I blacked out one time, and I haven't shared this in a while. Uh, and a guy who I thought was my friend, I hadn't blacked out yet. Let me back up. I had been up for about 3 days on bath salts and snorting Percocets and probably some heroin and stuff. And my friend comes over. He's like, dude, you're wigging out. Gave me he told me it was a Xanax. And I think it was like it was more than that. And I blacked out. And when I came to, everything, this little like garage that somebody was letting me live in all my things were gone. And they pointed at this, my girlfriend, like she took it, and I jumped on the hood. She tried to get away. I jumped on the hood of her car and punched her windshield out. Like, and that's so uncharacteristic for me. And it was like I was watching myself from above, but nothing really occurred from that. But that's just like one of the things that just stands out to me today sometimes, like the where that takes us. I was a protector. I was fighting bullies, and now I'm punching out windshields in my girlfriend's car. Like that's how sick we get on these drugs. And uh I'm continuing to spiral. My hustle was running dope for dope boys and doing collections and things like that. Just I had a car, so it was my hustle. Uh I remember the first time that I went to went to get help. I went into UC Medical Center, which is our biggest hospital here in Cincinnati. It's the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Went into the emergency room thinking that, well, I'm sick, they'll help me. And I remember they put me in a bed in the hallway, which I later learned was what they do when they have overflow. But at the time, it wasn't explained to me, and I didn't really understand. But nonetheless, then they took my vitals, and a nurse practitioner, I believe, or a doctor comes up to me, and they almost with a grin on their face go, "Look, we don't do that here. There's places for that." And I was like, "What do you mean? I'm sick? What do you mean you'll do that here? I'm sick." Like, and basically they just treated me so like I didn't deserve to be cared for. Uh, and it was heartbreaking. It was dehumanizing. And it was my first experience with real stigma. And I carried that shit. Fast forward a little bit, I was running dope one day. I was going to pick up something from a guy in a neighborhood here in Cincinnati on the called Fairmount, this place called Bracken Woods. And I'm in this apartment building, and I caught the dope, and the drug dealer shuts the door, and it was like a long hallway. And then it would like go down, and then the stairs would go down. So I'm at the other end of the hallway, and I look down the hallway, and there's this dude, taller guy gentleman with his hood on, and he has a knife in his hand. And I'm just like looking back. I know this dude ain't gonna reopen his door for me. And so we just start going at each other. I grab him, I try to grab his biceps, and he stabs me. Uh right kind of like under my armpit, but more towards my lat on my back. And I felt it, but my adrenaline was going. I'm trying to wrestle his the knife out of his hand. We fall around, and he gets me again. Boom. Same place, same area. And this time it knocks the air out of me. We continue to tussle, and I eventually kind of get the knife out of his hand. I kind of got him down. I hit him a few times, and I get outside and collapse. I don't really all I kept thinking was I got to get back to that abandoned building I was staying at, because I need to do this dope. Like, I got to get well. Like, that's all I'm thinking about. And I get back there. The girl I'm dating is there. She goes, "Why are you wet?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I took my shirt off, and I had 2 gaping stab wounds on my back, just gushing, pretty much. But I still needed to get that one more in me. And then when the ambulance came, they took me to the hospital. Police came in and questioned me. And I wasn't having it. At that time, it was like I had accepted that this was my life now. I'd almost forgot who I was at one time, that I was a fighter. And more importantly, like, the longer I stayed in addiction, the more I believed that I could get out, the less I believed I could get out of it, the less I believed I deserved. And on top of that, we always have family and we have these people that we think are supposed to be our support system. In a lot of cases, they are, but they don't know how to support us. They end up kind of beating us down a little bit because they don't know any other way. They're reacting with love. But to us in the moment, it feels like an attack. So all I'm hearing is negativity all the time. How much of a mess up I am, how much all these things, and it just continued to beat me down. It beat me down for years. Uh, and it got to a point where I just didn't think people like me recovered. So many like broken moments. I'd stolen everything from my mother of value, things that can never be replaced. And although they didn't think I cared, it weighed on me heavily. But the only defense mechanism I had at this time was getting high and shutting down. Those were the only two things I knew, and manipulation. I was doing one of three of those things on a daily basis, if not all three. And, my dad, man, that dude just never really gave up on me. Even though he said he was done with me, he never really was. And he convinced me to finally go to detox. And I had heard, so the detox I went to, I let other people's opinions of treatment keep me out of treatment for years. Like people were like, oh, there's bed bugs. I'm like, I'm not going there. There's bed bugs. Living in an abandoned building with bed bugs. You know what I mean? Like, what's the difference? Like, it just did, like, we can find all these justifications. I wouldn't say I wasn't ready. I would say, like, I was terrified to get clean. I didn't know how I could live anymore without that needle and that spoon. It just didn't, I couldn't fathom. It was scary to me. Like, how do I face myself anymore? How do I face throwing away my career? How do I face the harm I've caused all these people? I can't even face myself in the mirror, let alone anybody else. But if I just stay getting high and I die this way, then people will somehow, that'll be better than attempting to get sober. And I truly believe that. So I finally went to detox and I was there. I stayed for 7 days and left and felt the need to convince people that I was going to do this. Like, oh, I'm good, knowing I'm not. And got back to a hotel. I just copped more dope because I was still sick. And I used to shoot in my neck. And I remember looking in the mirror, shot in my neck. And usually I could make it back to the bed or a chair or something. This time I didn't. And let me point out one thing real quick. I was alone in this hotel room. I was alone. But when I woke up, there was paramedics around me. How those paramedics got there, I don't know. But they Narcaned me. And when I started to come to, I remember this paramedic, I encountered him before. He goes, bro, you are dead. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, like, no, I'm not. Like, I just remember feeling like I really did something to myself that time. It was like my internally, it felt as though I had been taken out of my body, thrown around, and just tossed right back in. Like, not correct. But that's just how I felt. And I kind of came to it like, we're going to take you to the hospital. I'm like, absolutely not. No. Ended up getting kicked out of that hotel, ended up in another one. And I remember walking into this hotel and just breaking down. Like, oh my, I can't do this anymore. But I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone to turn to. And the only place I could think about calling was the treatment center I just left. I called them. I expected them to treat me as the same way that everybody else had. You don't deserve it. You shouldn't have left. You made a mistake. This is the consequences of your actions. And that is the exact opposite of what happened. The lady on the other end of the phone says, I say all this to her. She goes, baby, it's going to be okay. We're going to get you back in here. We're going to get you taken care of, okay? And I don't know what it was about that moment or the words that she said, but I believed her. And it was the first time that I could really say that somebody showed me compassion in the way that I needed to see it. Just to be told that it's okay, not to be told that the world is ending and that I'm a F up and all these other things. Like, she genuinely told me it was going to be okay. And I couldn't even tell you who this lady is today. I hope by now I've told this story enough that she has finally heard and she knows. But even if she doesn't, the point is that she planted a seed of compassion in me that day. And the seed of compassion, when you feel broken, it like falls into those cracks, and it just, all it needs is a little water and it can grow into something beautiful. But it it has to be planted, and we can't always see it. But what I could see was just a little glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. It still didn't feel like it was reachable, but it was there. And when it got into treatment, I was very resentful at myself, hated myself. I cursed myself. I blamed God. I blamed my family. I blamed the entire United States of America. I blamed the lady in her car going to church on Sundays. It was everybody else's fault but mine. And I just was really struggling with this acceptance and feeling as though I should just go back out, because how do I live? I can't live this way. I can't face these people. And then one night, they talk about spiritual experiences in recovery, and we can't really plan a spiritual experience. And sometimes we're not even sure what it is when it comes, but I'm going to share mine with you. So I was having a dream one night, and I was flying through the air in this dream, and it was over this huge wooded area. It was either dusk or it was dawn, but it was very dim. And I came to a clearing in the woods as I'm flying, and I stopped over this clearing. And in this clearing was a lion. And I floated down almost like a feather or something into this lion. And I come to as the lion in this dream now. Now I'm the lion. And I'm looking around, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this what looks like a pitch black smoking ram with beady red eyes, giant horns. He walks out of the woods into this clearing. Next to him comes this same thing, a smoking black, beady red eyes, giant horns, like almost like a deer next to him. And next to him comes, the only way I can describe it would be like a wolf or like a jackal, snarling, beady red eyes, black, and they're starting to stalk. And I'm terrified. And I start to run. I'm running. I jump over this log, and I look behind me, and they're gaining on me. And I'm running. I get to this bridge, and I cross this bridge. And when I get across, I remembered something, that I was a lion. And I stopped running, and I turned around, and I roared, and they scattered. And I woke up from that dream. What did that mean? Like, it was like one of those moments where you're like, wow, that meant something. There's a message there. And the first thing I could think of was like, that lion, that champion, he's still in here somewhere. And maybe my demons are more scared of me than I should be of them. All I have to do is stop running. All I have to do is roar. And with that came these other perceptions of what was happening. Wait a minute. I'm not a failure. I'm not a loser. I'm a fighter. I have to fight. What do champions do? They stand up, they fight. Just because I'm losing, I haven't lost yet. I'm still breathing. I can do this. I want this. And I focused 100%. I took it on like I would if I was having the fight of my life. So really, I was, right? And so I continued to take a perception. How do I win fights? How did I become a champion? I got a good corner. I became a champion because I had a phenomenal coach. I had excellent training partners, intelligent, super smart nutritionists. I had all these individuals around me, all for the purpose of me getting my hand raised. I have to rebuild that. And they talk about sponsors, they talk about mentors, they talk about fellowships. And that was how the perception I took of that process. My sponsor was my coach, right? My training partners are the fellowship, the relationships I'm I'm building. My home gym would be my home group. Like I took all these concepts and I made them make sense to me because, and one of the things they say in the big book, like I see fighting everything, or I don't really like this saying, so I don't really know it, but I never really liked that because I don't cease fighting. I ceased fighting myself and began to fight the addiction that was destroying me, but I never stopped fighting. And all those years I was in those streets, I never stopped fighting. And I had to remember that. Like even the days when I wanted to give up, clearly I didn't. When I was dope sick, I went out and got right. So I gotta take that energy and apply it. And I was like, I need to complete this. I need to complete things. So I stayed for the duration of the treatment until they said I was ready to go. I was 100% against sober living. I don't want to live with other dudes. I was convinced it was some kind of racket. Uh, but I met a guy who I made my coach, my sponsor, and he told me to go to sober living. And I made this conscious commitment that I no longer knew what was best for me. It didn't matter what I once did or who I once thought I was or whatever it was. None of it mattered. What mattered was me getting through another 24 hours. And I don't know how to do that anymore. So I got a sponsor. He told me to go to sober living. And I mean, what I did was I'm going to take suggestion. As crazy as that sounds, sometimes that could be the difference in life and death. Like, so I decided to take suggestion and not just take suggestion, but take it as law. And I would do that. If this guy is where I want to be, I need to do what he tells me to do. I know he has my best interests in mind. Why? Because I have to trust. That's a very difficult thing, especially when we've had a lot of trauma, especially associated around our addictions, or the relationships with drug dealers and all these things that, the different levels to that. So, and, So I worked, I did the steps. I began working with a sponsor. I began to go back to the treatment center uh, at about 6 months. I graduated after 6 months from like the outpatient aspect and everything, and went back as a mentor. Began to mentor guys, and I realized early on that I don't know what we want to call it, but I'm gonna just for the sake of this, I'm gonna call it a gift. I I realized early on I had a gift with people. Like I was likable and I was genuine. And people realized that, and people were able to connect with me. And these are people that I never would imagine would be able to, maybe, or people that other people are counting out. I realized I did the best with the people that everybody said couldn't be helped. Well, he's not ready. Okay, well, let me talk because I know what it feels like to not be ready, but I also know what it feels like to be scared to go. That we have to discuss this a little bit more. Sometimes people will be like, they're just not ready. Like that's a cop out. No, maybe we got to try a little harder with this person, and that's kind of what I began to do. One of the scariest things for me was, what am I going to do with what does my future look like? I was in my mid-30s. At the time when I got sober, I had no kids. I had no wife. I had no ex-wife. I had no girlfriend then. I had nothing. No bank, no retirement, like nothing. I was literally dedicated my life to fighting, which I could not return to because I had some serious injuries. I'd been stabbed. I also had some issues with my hip. And so I my first job in recovery, I ended up like threatening my boss because I thought that was a good idea to check him, and he fired me. So uh, I ended up working back in a bar, checking IDs, which is a terrible place for somebody early in recovery, but nonetheless, that's where I ended up. And I would have these trials, these tribulations, like we all do, these job losses, losing friends, family, relationships, and I realized every time something happened, and I had faith, or I put it in God's hands, or I trusted the process, things worked out. Like if I didn't pick up, oh my God, like I was like, wow, they were right. Like I didn't have to sabotage everything to get through this. I didn't have to go commit a crime. I didn't have to, freak out and burn a bridge, whatever, whatever it was. I didn't have to do that. That's how my belief in God began to form. my re-belief, I should say. I always believed, but it began to change. Like from maybe God didn't put me through these things to punish me, but he put me through these to prepare me. So what did he prepare me for? I don't know at this time. And I gotta trust the process. And I ended up getting with a girl that I'd known for years, and we ended up having a baby. Um, Around that same time, I got a phone call from a nurse, not nurse, but a college professor at UC Medical Center, the College of Nursing there, the same hospital I experienced all this stigma. I have multiple stories I couldn't even go into, but I experienced a lot of stigma with this hospital. I'd been kicked out, all these things. I'd experienced just a lack of compassion, and it was terrible. So 2 years into recovery, I get a call. Hey, Daniel, we're thinking about, and this is, 6 years ago. She goes, hey, Daniel, I know, I hope this is okay, but I know you're in recovery. And we're thinking about starting this peer program here at the hospital. We're having people with lived experience go bedside and talk to people. Not a new concept today, but 6 years ago it was. It was hard to do. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm all in. So I started volunteering. I was volunteering 4 hours a week. The stigma was still so bad at that hospital that they didn't even tell anybody what I was doing. They just thought I was a volunteer walking around with a counselor or a social worker, uh, talking with patients about HIV or drugs or something. Like, they didn't know though that I was a member of the recovery. Until one day they started to eavesdrop. They started to notice that these interactions I was having with people were different than theirs, that I was accomplishing things, that all of a sudden people who had been, at this hospital 4 or 5 times, shutting off social work, were now leaving to go to treatment. And that first year, working 4 hours a week, or volunteering 4 hours a week, me and another gentleman I brought in, we ended up getting 58 people into treatment from the emergency. And I knew we had something special. Like, this is something special. This is different. This is not just a consult service. We're really affecting lives. And again, I didn't know what I was going to do with my future. I actually applied to work at this insurance company, and I don't even know what I was going to do there, but I was good. They were going to hire me. And I ended up telling the college professor at UC, like, hey, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to volunteer like this. I have to move on from bouncing and go do something else. And she goes, well, Daniel, actually, we want you to hold that thought. We want to offer you our a full-time position here at the hospital as our first ever peer recovery specialist. And I mean, life-altering opportunity for someone like I never had like a job like that, or just, it was one of those first full circle moments where I had a lot of guilt because I had thrown away my fight career, or what I thought was. But I realized at that time I was never meant to be a fighter in that sense of the word. What I went through as an athlete and as an addict were to prepare me for my bigger purpose, for my bigger mission. I needed that experience. And if I was able to survive it, I was going to be able to do something amazing with it. And that day that I felt as though I'd been thrusted in my body in a different way, maybe I had. Maybe God said, not yet, Daniel, and threw me back in. It set me back with a purpose. I don't know, but I know that I was able to do things that I didn't understand I could do, or didn't understand where I learned these skills. Are they genetic? Where do they come from? Or are they just something that is God given? I don't know. But I was able to connect with people, and I ended up helping to create that program, expand it, and basically help write the model for what they incorporate all over America now. And not only that, I was able to become a co-author. I co-authored a medical research abstract that I actually also got to present to the Emergency Nurses Association, which was a huge. I have a 10th grade education. I have a GED, but most people who have, you know, dropped out of high school or got GEDs, they tend to downplay themselves. But instead, I saw opportunity. Instead of being like around these doctors and them saying things like that I didn't understand, I acted like I understood what they were saying, and then I would go Google it. And if I didn't, eventually I would. I did notes in the computer like they did. I had access to medical records. Like I had all these things that people like us normally didn't get access to because of our pasts. And I was able to work with, in a 3-year period, I worked with over 2,000 people and got over 1,100 of them into treatment from the hospital, with other peers and things like that. And it's funny because I remember when I got clean, I was like, I don't want to work in treatment. That seems awful. I don't even want people to know my past. Uh, but also along this too, because this will kind of tie in with the 60 days in thing. They, because of my past as a fighter, when I got sober, it was very intriguing to the news, to these other organizations, to these other platforms, that somebody with had this fall from grace, but they were able to make a comeback and now are spreading hope. And that at first was very uncomfortable for me. The first news story that aired, I cried. I held my daughter and cried like a little girl because I was so terrified that now my secret was out. That it was a secret in the first place. But you know what I mean? Like it was just like it was like a coming out. And it was terrifying. And I expected all this negative feedback like I did when I called that treatment center, but it was the same thing. Like all this positive feedback, all these people offering support, and just people were proud. And I realized how many people are losing people to this disease. And I just felt like it was my calling to do something. But the opportunities continue to come. I now still work in treatment. I've been sober since November 1st of 2016. It was, by the grace of God. I had a hip replacement in recovery. I've been able to help create programs. I've been able to take treatment centers that were in wonderful programs that maybe had things that they weren't doing correctly. I've been able to go in and use my experience to help, give them more knowledge or help them be better for the community and be able to reach more people in the community. And not only that, but make a bigger impact. And about just when you think there's no more opportunities that are coming your way, I get a message on Instagram from it was like a weird company. And they said they saw a video of me talking about addiction online. It was for the addiction series. And they wanted to contact me and thought that I'd be perfect for this role coming up. So I signed all this paperwork. Turns out it was a casting company for 60 Days In. I had watched like a few episodes, but it wasn't one of those shows where I was like, that would be cool to do. It was probably actually one of those shows where I was like, that's awful. Why would anybody want to go to jail voluntarily? And, but I told myself, like, God has not, God, my universe, I still, we all, that's my perception, but it's hasn't given me opportunities yet that I wasn't meant to have. And I approached it that way. I said, look, if I get through this casting process and somehow make it on this show, it's where I'm supposed to be. And that's exactly what I did. And over about the course of a year, the background check took like 4 months, like very thorough background check when you're going to be on TV. And, interview after interview. And I had to be really careful about what was on social media and all these things. And sorry about that. And, so I got that opportunity and it was cool. And it was, people always want to ask me like, how was it? Like, well, it was jail, right? Like, it's not much better whether you're on a show or not. Okay. I was getting a call.
No worries.
It was, I'm grateful for the experience because what it did was it gave me an opportunity to almost like be re-humbled in a certain way that I normally wouldn't be able to be re-humbled. I wouldn't be going to jail. for hopefully any reason today. But they brought me in. They were telling me up front, like, how bad the addiction problem is becoming in Utah. Or I should say the addiction problem, the fentanyl problem. And fentanyl was my drug of choice. Well, it became my drug of choice. It was Percocet, Oxycontin, heroin, and fentanyl. But nonetheless, the problem was growing. They didn't know how to tackle it. And I do. I can confidently say, like, I've worked in this long enough that I still have a lot to learn. Like, don't get me wrong, but I'm confident in the skill set that I have and the things that I've been able to do and implement, that I could do that for somewhere else if the need be there. If it's there, if that's where God and the universe want me, then they want me there for a reason. It's because my message may have purpose there. So that's what I did. And there's a few things they didn't show that I like to kind of talk about. My first cellmate, I had to go back to the basics. Like, what do we do when we're in situations where we can't access meetings? We can't access recovery. We pick up a book and we read it with each other and we discuss it. And that's what I did with him his last week. And he actually ended up leaving treatment and leaving jail and going to treatment, which he had no plans of doing originally, because there was no real linkage there. There was no linkage to care. There was no peers. There was nothing. And I tried to stay as true to myself as I could. And that's one of the things that kind of got me caught up too. So, but it was just like a wonderful opportunity. It continues to, it's like our stories. Like, the longer we're clean, the longer we're sober, the longer we're in recovery, the more immaculate and crazy our stories can become. And it's not always like, hey, look what I did. It's look what we can do. Like, when we don't pick up, when we work towards something positive, when we find our purpose and we, grab it and excel at it. Like, there's so much opportunity. I believe there's a drive that is instilled in those of us that have survived this epidemic or survived addiction and alcoholism that other people just don't. It's just, it's almost like you have to swim in the lake of hell in order to have it. It's something you have to experience. Like, feel those flames burning on the bottom of your feet, to escape that madness, to help lead others out of that madness. It cannot just be read. It cannot just be said. It has to be felt. And when you survive what we have that message already inside of us. It's already there. And there's going to be times that are challenging. We're going to be put in challenging situations where we normally wouldn't be able to spread that message with the purpose of spreading it, like Utah County Jail, like 60 Days In. That was a very challenging situation. It was much more challenging than they showed. Not just me forgetting my name at first or, anything like that. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next. I mean, it's just having opportunities like to get on podcasts and everything is just, it's wonderful. Like, I don't know. I really enjoy it. I'm really grateful for it. And, I encourage anybody that gets an opportunity like that, like, don't pass up these opportunities because of fear. They are going to be scary. But if it's there for you, it's because it's supposed to be there for you. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have. Like, you've earned these opportunities today. We have to seize those. And that's how we move forward.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Dan. So much I can relate to. So much. I loved how you talked about the progression of the disease, and I loved hearing your story as like an MMA fighter and the comeback story. And you have such a powerful story, man. And I've heard a lot. I've been going to meetings for years and years, AA, NA, you name it. And you have an amazing story. And I love the aspect of like the comeback and everything. I was going to ask you, what do you think was like, what was the hardest thing about like 60 days in? What was the hardest thing for you? Was it being away from family? What do you think it was for you?
I think, yeah, being away from my daughter was definitely the hardest part. Um, and then And that in the isolation. So we were in isolation 20 hours a day, or in our cells 20 hours a day, or more sometimes. But I would say that those two carried equal value, but more of like having a 6-year-old or, well, 5-year-old girl at home who you can't get a hold of, your trusting family, and also this, I want to add this too, knowing that I can't tell people where I'm going. I just had to basically like vanish. Like my best friend knew, my dad knew, my baby mom knew, but the whole community, and it's crazy where people's minds go when people like us disappear. Rehab. Daniel's back in rehab. Like, what? Like, I came out and had so many messages like, praying for you, bro. Like, praying for me. Like, oh my God, thank you. But, you know,
Yeah, because they're like, "Oh, this can't be good," you know? Anytime any of us that are, like, sober disappear for anything, it's like, "Oh, this can't be good," you know?
yeah,
I was gonna ask you too, like, there was a scene that I remember where you're literally sitting in the day room talking to this dude. I don't know if he was your cellie at the time. I don't think he was. And you basically, like, just got done telling him that, like, you've battled addiction and drug addiction, and then he makes that comment about, like, do you remember what I'm talking about? Where he
yeah,
makes a comment about, like, on his skateboard, and he's seeing some guy, like, basically overdosing in the corner, and he says, like, "Oh, they deserve it," or whatever. I thought, like, "Oh, no, like, this guy's gonna get it," you know? And you were explaining on the show, like, it was hard for you to, like, hold your tongue on that one and not, like, basically beat him, you know? Can you talk about that just for a second?
yeah, sure. And I'm glad you brought that up. When that sneak peek first came out, I did get some a lot of like, I mean, there was trolls and stuff anyway. There's always going to be, but there was a part of that that nobody really knew about. So the day before that, I was on the phone with my best friend, and he told me that another friend of ours who had been in recovery for about 11 years had relapsed and passed away from an overdose. So that was really weighing on me. And the guy's name was Ryan, who was in the scene. So Ryan had just came into our pod, and I could tell like he kind of just would like say things, and you're just like, what did you? Why would you say that, bro? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, like prior to that. So, but I was sitting with him, and I was mindful. I was on a show too. Like, even though we kind of forget, we're always mindful of it. So I know I have to interact, things like that. So we're sitting there and actually started the conversation like, yeah, I lost one of my friends, yada, yada. And then we started talking about, I come from one of the hardest hit places in America, Cincinnati and Dayton. We're on, hit really hard, just Ohio in general, right? And then he starts saying what he said. And I said, quote unquote, like, I couldn't believe what he just said to me. I'm gonna open hand beat this man because he doesn't deserve a closed fist. And like, I was like, when he said it, it like took a minute. I was like, wait a minute, did I hear that right? Then I was really upset, and I walked around, but I saw an opportunity there. So I went up to my cell right after that, actually sitting there, and heard my sponsor's voice in my head. And he would always kind of back me up, like, yeah, F them, Daniel. But in the end, he was be like, Daniel, how do we treat sick people? We pray for them and we ask how we can be of service. And I was like, he's right. He's just what was going on in my head. So I actually gave him a pair of headphones, the broken pair, but I gave him a pair. They still worked for listening to music and stuff. And then I was like, why does Ryan feel this way? Maybe I need to talk to him. Maybe I need to find out what's happened in his life that's given him uh, this perception and life is so worthless. Um, and he had 4 DUIs, clearly had an alcohol problem, was clearly in denial, had been to treatment multiple times, had always been kicked out or left, and literally got into it with his mom's boyfriend and was now there for domestic violence with his mom's boyfriend because he slashed his bicycle tires. So like clearly there's a lot going on here, right? Like, And I'm like, I need to understand, like, this guy's struggling. I mean, he's telling me how he misses his son, and like this guy has, and although there's no excuse for what he said, and I was really upset about it. Like, I was upset. It was very bad timing. But I saw it as an opportunity to be compassionate. And I was able to kind of, I had a grapevine, the AA grapevine, the meeting in print, and I had that. And I had it, I kind of put it on his bed, like after he was my cellmate. And he picked it up and he started reading it. And to me, that was I couldn't have asked for more. And he's like, "What is this?" And I said, "That's AA's meeting in print, bro. Like, you ain't never seen that before?" And he's like, "No." And although he didn't really like talk about it much, to me, it was like, I just did what I accomplished what I needed to do. I just planted the seed. There's something planted there. Now, whether he waters it or whether it gets watered is not that's not what I need to be concerned about. I just need to be concerned with showing him that even though he may think people like me and our lives aren't as important, I'm still going to show him that it is. And not only that, I'm going to take it one step further and show him that his life is important to me, just because mine's not important to him, that I can rise above and that we can rise above. And the way that we get others to change their perceptions of of people in addiction, we have to first understand why they have that perception in the first place. So that was the opportunity that I had, and that's what I wanted to showcase there. They just didn't show very much of it, but but that's what I was feeling at the time was opportunity.
Yeah, man, that's so cool. And I was going to ask you too. I'm in an area. I'm in Orange County, California. Another area hit hard with the opiate epidemic. I had a similar story to yours, and like it took an overdose and Narcan and basically CPR and a crazy event to really get me into recovery. I kind of feel like with the opiate epidemic, it's really on us, those that are now like sober and in recovery, to really be the ones working hard to like reach out to those that are still suffering, because I think other people that are not addicts or alcoholics, I think they see there's a problem, as they're driving by and see homeless outside and shooting up and all the overdoses. I think they see there's a problem, but they just don't really know what to do about it. So I feel like it really falls on us that have been through addiction, are now in the recovery path. Do you agree with that, that it kind of falls on us to really try and help those people out?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think, it does. I think that we can reach people that nobody else can, like our experiences. And not only that, but I believe that the unforeseen aspect of that people don't realize is when they begin to share their stories with others, it won't harm you, it will heal you. And I think that a lot of times people like, with that it is our responsibility to carry the message. Well, more people would carry it if they understood that. Like, hey, I'm not sharing this with somebody isn't making like there's a level of vulnerability there. And what that does though is that's where the connection happens. When we open up that vulnerability and they open up their vulnerability, and then those two things connect. And that's something that only we with this experience are able to really accomplish in the way that it needs to be done. Because people will be, you don't know what I've experienced. Maybe I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know what you've experienced. Maybe I haven't had that exact same experience. My experience has given me similar feelings, and we all understand those feelings. So I think that I agree with that 100%. 100%.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. I've taken a good amount of time. I appreciate it so much. I loved hearing your story. I loved hearing about the changes you have made. All of those people that you were able to go bedside and talk to in the hospital, with a job that they had just created, and able to connect with them on a level that others may have probably couldn't have, because of your experiences, and able to get that many people into treatment. That's so awesome. I loved hearing that. I appreciate your time, man. Do you have any final words to anyone still out there suffering, that is maybe contemplating recovery and is like, halfway in, halfway out? Is there anything you would say to them?
Yeah, yeah. I would say two things. For one, don't overthink it. Okay. The regardless of how you feel, you may not feel like you deserve recovery. You may not feel like it's something that you can obtain. You're scared to be sick, but I'm telling you that you can. And not only that, but you deserve it. You deserve a better life. You deserve to be loved. And yes, you've hurt people. Yes, your family might be mad at you. Yes, you haven't heard a positive thing said about you in a long time. But I'm telling you, you got to get around people who will. You got to get around people like me. People who will help breathe life into you. That there's so much more for you to do. That the bondage of addiction, those chains can be broken, and that you have the power inside of you to break them. You don't have to be all in right now. You just have to be willing to take the first step. Just have to be willing to walk through the doors of the treatment center or be willing to go into that meeting. That's all. Just be willing to go through and let the rest play out, because it will play out the way it is supposed to. As long as you let go of the wheel and let God, the universe, whatever it is you may believe in at this time, help guide you, because it will not steer you wrong. The only time we're steered wrong is when we decide to grab the wheel and in a different direction. But today you have the power to make the choice. Don't wait until that's gone. And just know that you deserve better. And if you don't believe you are loved, I promise you, you are. And if not, I will love you until you feel like others do. We will love you until you feel like others do. There's a beautiful community out here. We want you to join us, please. Just know you deserve it. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. One last thing, where do people find you if they want to follow some of your YouTube or your social media? How do they find you?
So yeah, I'm on Facebook, Inspiring Recovery with Daniel Ritchie, or you can just look up Daniel Ritchie. The easiest way to find any of my social media platforms right now is Google. Just Google Daniel Ritchie Cincinnati or Daniel Ritchie MMA, and a whole bunch of stuff will come up. All of my platforms. I'm definitely more active on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok than any of the others. But I would hope that you follow me. I love engagement. I love questions. Don't be scared to disagree with me. Don't be scared to incorporate your own things. Like, I love that. I love the different avenues and the different perceptions that people have. And but that's where you can find me. And yeah, I look forward to hearing feedback on anybody who's watched this, or anybody's own experience.
Cool, man. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for your time, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, brother.
All right, you made it through another episode. Thanks again, and if you'd like to collaborate or come on the show, please email me at thesoberfixpodcast@gmail.com. Have a great day.